The frigid wind howled across the vast, desolate plains of Krymar, whipping through the ice-encrusted marshlands that stretched endlessly beneath a violet aurora sky. Second Lieutenant Sarah Hayes pulled her thermal cloak tighter around her shoulders as she huddled beside the small heating unit in her field tent. 3 days had passed since the ambush that separated her from her Galactic Coalition unit. 3 days alone in this frozen hell, with dwindling supplies and the constant threat of Dahar patrols hunting her. Sarah checked her field scanner one more time before powering it down to conserve energy. No signals. No rescue beacon. No hope of immediate extraction. The cold metal of her sidearm pressed against her hip, a small comfort in this wasteland. Her makeshift camp sat at the edge of a frozen marsh, partially concealed by crystalline rock formations that rose like broken teeth from the permafrost. Somewhere beyond those rocks, she knew the Dahar forces were mobilizing. Intelligence had confirmed their presence on Krymar weeks ago, the reptilian warriors of the Dahar Association, seeking to claim the planet's rare mineral deposits to fuel their biological weapons program. What should have been a routine reconnaissance mission had turned into a desperate fight for survival when her squad encountered a Dahar patrol. She was the only one who made it out alive. Sarah finished the last of her ration pack, a tasteless but nutritionally complete meal that did little to satisfy her hunger but would keep her functioning. As she packed away the empty wrapper, her enhanced hearing picked up something, a faint buzzing, barely perceptible above the howling wind. Her hand instinctively moved to her weapon, but before she could draw it, she felt a sharp sting on her neck, then another on her arm, tiny pinpricks of pain that would have been insignificant if not for the immediate numbness that followed. "What the?" she gasped, slapping at her neck and catching a glimpse of something small and iridescent between her fingers before it crumbled to dust. Insects, but not native to Krymar. Nothing so delicate could evolve naturally in this environment. The realization hit her just as her vision began to blur. Vzak, the Dahar's biological weapon, genetically engineered insects designed to deliver neurotoxins through even the thickest combat gear. Sarah stumbled, her legs giving way beneath her as the toxin raced through her system. She tried to reach for her emergency beacon, but her arms felt like lead weights. The world tilted sideways as she collapsed onto the frozen ground, her consciousness fading rapidly. Her last thought before the darkness claimed her was that she had failed. The Dahar had found her, and she would never make it back to warn the Coalition about what she had discovered. The darkness took her. General Naxira's scales glistened in the dim light of the command tent as she observed the human female collapsed on the ground through the surveillance feed. The reptilian commander's vertical pupils narrowed with satisfaction, her cold-blooded metabolism perfectly adapted to Krymar's harsh environment. "Confirm termination," she hissed into her communicator, her forked tongue flickering between needle-sharp teeth. "Target is down, General," came the reply from Major Bella, the lupine officer leading the forward team. "Vzak toxin delivered successfully. Vital signs have ceased." Naxira clicked her claws against the metal console. "Excellent. Retrieve any intelligence materials and dispose of the body. High Command wants confirmation of elimination, not prisoners this time." "Understood, General." The transmission ended with a burst of static. Naxira turned to Lieutenant Trito, the arachnoid intelligence officer whose multiple eyes were focused on various data screens simultaneously. "How many Coalition soldiers remain on Krymar?" "Intelligence suggests this was the last survivor from the reconnaissance team." Trito clicked, mandibles working nervously. "Our patrols have eliminated all others. However, the Coalition base will notice their absence soon. We should expect reinforcements within 48 hours. By then, we'll have secured the northern mining quadrant," Naxira said dismissively. "Let them come. They'll find nothing but corpses frozen in the ice." The General's communicator chimed again. "Forward team reporting. General, we've reached the human's position, confirming termination." Through the grainy feed, Nexira watched as Major Bella and her team approached the fallen human. The lupine officer nudged the still body with her boot, then knelt to check for vital signs. After a moment, she looked up at the surveillance drone. No pulse, no respiration. The Vizak worked perfectly. Subject appears to have died almost instantly. Search the tent, Nexira ordered. Then leave the body. Let the scavengers have it. Yes, General. Nexira watched with growing satisfaction as the team efficiently ransacked the humans' makeshift shelter, collecting datapads, weapons, and communication devices. This female soldier had been remarkably resilient, evading capture for 3 days after her unit was ambushed. There was a certain respect in that, one warrior to another. But humans were ultimately fragile creatures. No match for Dahar biological superiority. The Vizak insects performed better than expected, Trito noted, his multiple limbs manipulating holographic displays showing the toxin's effects. Complete neural shutdown within 30 seconds of injection. Death follows approximately 45 seconds later. High Command will be pleased, Nexira said. This field test confirms what our labs predicted. The Coalition has no defense against our biological agents. As the forward team completed their search and departed from the humans' camp, Nexira allowed herself a moment of triumph. The Coalition forces had been pushing back Dahar expansion for too long. With weapons like the Vzak, the balance of power would finally shift. Prepare the report for High Command, she instructed Trito. Emphasize the effectiveness of the Vzak against human physiology. This success will ensure continued funding for the Bioweapons Division. Yes, General. The arachnoid officer's mandibles clicked in acknowledgement. 45 minutes after the Dahar team departed, something impossible happened. Sarah Hayes opened her eyes. The world swam into focus slowly, painfully. Every nerve ending in her body screamed as sensation returned. Her mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and her limbs trembled uncontrollably as she forced herself to roll onto her side. She was alive. Confusion gave way to realization as her military training kicked in. The Vzak toxin, it hadn't killed her. The numbness, the paralysis, the slowed vital signs. It had merely induced a state mimicking death. Sarah's mind raced despite the lingering effects of the toxin. Either the Dahar had miscalculated the dosage needed for a human of her size, or more likely, her Coalition-issued immunoboosters had partially counteracted the neurotoxin. The regular injections all soldiers received to protect against biological warfare must have provided just enough resistance to prevent the toxin from stopping her heart completely. Instead of killing her, it had merely put her into a deep, death-like sleep. Sarah forced herself to her hands and knees, fighting waves of nausea and dizziness. Her tent had been ransacked, equipment scattered or stolen. Blood, her blood, had dried on the ground where she had collapsed. The Dahar had believed her dead and moved on. Their mistake. It took nearly 10 minutes for Sarah to regain enough control of her limbs to stand. Her equipment was gone, but not everything. The Dahar had been thorough but hasty. In their rush to confirm her death and report back, they had missed her backup weapon hidden in the false bottom of her field pack. They had taken her standard-issue Coalition pistol, but overlooked the compact plasma cutter she had modified into a makeshift weapon. They had also left behind something valuable, their tracks, clear impressions in the frost, leading away from her camp toward the north. Sarah's training took over as she assessed her situation. She was alone, poorly equipped, and recovering from a neurotoxin that should have killed her. The rational course of action would be to activate her emergency beacon, which the Dahar had also overlooked, sewn into the lining of her thermal suit, and wait for extraction. But extraction could take hours, even days. By then, the Dahar would have moved their camp, covering their tracks, taking with them the intelligence she had been sent to gather, information about their new biological weapons program that could threaten thousands of Coalition lives. Sarah made her decision. She would not wait for rescue. She would follow the Dahar to their camp, gather the intelligence herself, and, if possible, eliminate the threat they posed. She gathered what supplies remained: the plasma cutter, a simple filtration mask she assembled from components in her medical kit to protect against further Vzak attacks, emergency rations the Dahar had deemed worthless, and the tracking device she removed from her suit lining. The tracker wouldn't send a signal strong enough to reach coalition forces yet, but it would record her position for later retrieval. As she prepared to move out, Sarah caught her reflection in a shard of ice. Her face was pale, with dark circles under her eyes from the toxin's effects. But there was something else there too, a cold determination, a fierce resolve that hadn't been there before. The Dahar thought they had killed her. They would soon learn how wrong they were. The frozen marshlands of Krymar became even more treacherous after nightfall. The temperature plummeted to levels that would freeze exposed human flesh within minutes, and the violet aurora cast eerie, shifting shadows across the landscape, making navigation a challenge even with thermal imaging. Sarah moved carefully, following the Dahar tracks while staying low to the ground. The effects of the toxin still lingered in her system, causing occasional muscle spasms and momentary lapses in her vision. But her military training helped her push through the discomfort. 3 hours into her pursuit, she spotted the first signs of the Dahar camp, a series of portable shelters nestled within a rocky outcropping that provided natural protection against Krymar's brutal winds. The camp was larger than she had anticipated, suggesting that this wasn't merely a patrol, but a forward operating base for their operations on the planet. Sarah settled into a concealed position among a cluster of ice formations and observed the camp through her thermal scope. Despite the distance and the darkness, she could make out at least a dozen heat signatures moving between the structures. Most showed the distinctive thermal pattern of reptilian Dahar, but she noted at least 2 signatures that indicated different species, likely the specialized troops the Dahar Association often employed for their unique abilities. She identified what appeared to be a command center, a larger structure with multiple guards, and a communications array extending from its roof. If there was intelligence to be gathered about the Vzak weapon, it would be there. Sarah knew she couldn't simply storm the camp. She was outnumbered and outgunned. She needed a diversion, a way to draw attention away from the command center long enough for her to infiltrate it. Her gaze fell on the camp's power generator, partially visible at the edge of the settlement. A well-placed shot from her plasma cutter could disable it, plunging the camp into darkness and forcing the Dahar to divert resources to repairs. But first, she needed to get closer. Sarah spent the next hour circling the camp, moving from one natural cover to the next, mapping guard positions and patrol patterns. The Dahar were disciplined but predictable, their movements reflecting their military training. Most importantly, they were confident that they had eliminated all coalition forces in the area, confident that they were alone on this frozen wasteland. That confidence would be their undoing. As she approached the camp's perimeter, Sarah spotted a lone guard, not a reptilian Dahar, but a lupine figure with a thick coat of silver-gray fur. The specialized senses of the wolf-like lupins made them excellent sentries, able to detect movement and scent intruders long before they came into visual range. This would be her first test. If she could neutralize the lupin without alerting the camp, she might have a chance at completing her mission. Sarah waited until the guard turned away, then moved silently across the frost-covered ground, her white thermal suit blending with the icy terrain. She was within 10 meters when the lupin's ears suddenly perked up, sensing something amiss. The guard turned, enhanced eyes scanning the darkness, nostrils flaring as they sought to catch a scent. "Who's there?" the lupin growled, paw moving to the communicator at her belt. Sarah recognized her from the surveillance feed, Major Bella, the officer who had confirmed her death. There was no time for stealth now. Sarah fired the plasma cutter, aiming not at the lupin, but at the portable light source illuminating the guard post. The device exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the area into darkness. Bella snarled, dropping immediately into a defensive crouch, her natural night vision giving her an advantage, even in the sudden blackout. But Sarah had anticipated this. She closed the distance between them in 3 rapid strides, using the momentary confusion to her advantage. The Lupin detected her approach and lashed out with razor-sharp claws, narrowly missing Sarah's throat. Sarah ducked under the attack and drove her combat knife, fashioned from a piece of her tent's support structure, into the junction between the Lupin's shoulder and neck, finding the pressure point that would temporarily paralyze the nerve cluster. Bella gasped, her body going rigid as the precise strike took effect. Before she could recover or call for help, Sarah struck again, this time targeting the base of the skull with the hilt of her knife. The Lupin collapsed without a sound. Sarah quickly dragged the unconscious form behind the guard post, securing the Major with restraints improvised from equipment straps. She relieved the Lupin of her weapons, a standard Dahar plasma rifle and a sidearm that looked more like a biological organism than a mechanical device. Now, better armed, Sarah turned her attention back to the camp. The darkness from the destroyed light hadn't yet been noticed. The Dahar likely assumed it was routine maintenance or a simple malfunction. She had perhaps 5 minutes before they realized their sentry wasn't responding to check-ins. 5 minutes to make her move. The arachnoid Lieutenant Trito moved methodically around the perimeter of the Dahar camp, his 8 eyes scanning in all directions simultaneously. Something felt wrong. Major Bella had missed her scheduled check-in 3 minutes ago. A minor discrepancy. But the Lupin was never late with her reports. Protocol dictated that he should alert General Naxira immediately, but he hesitated. False alarms were not tolerated in the Dahar military hierarchy. Trito decided to investigate personally before reporting. His multiple limbs carried him silently across the frozen ground toward Bella's guard post, his chitin exoskeleton providing natural protection against Krymar's bitter cold. As he approached the darkened post, his specialized sensory organs detected unusual thermal patterns, residual heat from a recent energy discharge, and the fading heat signature of a body on the ground behind the station. Bella. Trito immediately reached for his communicator, but before his limb could activate the device, he sensed movement, a heat signature that didn't match any Dahar species, moving rapidly toward him from his blind spot. The arachnoid whirled, mandibles clicking in alarm as he brought his weapon to bear. His multiple eyes registered a white-clad figure lunging toward him, a human female, impossibly alive and armed with Bella's plasma rifle. Impossible. The human had been terminated. He had seen the confirmation himself. The moment of confusion cost him dearly. Before he could fire, the human threw something at him, a small device that burst into a cloud of microscopic particles directly in front of his sensory organs. Thermal dust. The particles scattered the heat signatures around him, effectively blinding his thermal sense and confusing his motion detection. It was a countermeasure specifically designed to disable arachnoid tracking abilities. Trito fired blindly, the plasma bolt illuminating the darkness for a split second before dissipating harmlessly into the ice behind the human. He clicked his mandibles in a rapid pattern, signaling an alarm frequency that would alert the camp. The signal died in his throat as the human closed the distance between them, Bella's plasma rifle now pressing against the vulnerable junction of his cephalothorax and abdomen. "Remember me?" Sarah Hayes whispered, her voice hoarse from the lingering effects of the Vzok toxin. "I'm the corpse you left behind." The plasma rifle discharged, and Lieutenant Trito's multiple limbs spasmed once before going still. Sarah quickly retreated into the shadows as lights began to activate throughout the camp. The alarm finally raised. The element of surprise was diminishing rapidly, but she had eliminated 2 of the camp's key personnel, the sentry and the tracker. Now she needed to create enough chaos to reach the command center. She targeted the power generator, firing Bella's plasma rifle at its exposed cooling system. The generator didn't explode as she had hoped, but it began to malfunction spectacularly, power surges causing lights throughout the camp to flicker and fail. Secondary systems engaged, but the disruption had achieved its purpose. Dahar troops were rushing to secure critical systems, momentarily drawing attention away from the perimeter. In the confusion, Sarah spotted her primary target emerging from the command center, the reptilian general she had observed through the surveillance feed. General Naxira stood tall among her subordinates, barking orders and gesturing toward the malfunctioning generator with angry sweeps of her clawed hands. Sarah had a clear shot, but taking it would alert the entire camp to her position before she could reach the command center. Intelligence first, she reminded herself. Vengeance second. She circled around the eastern edge of the camp, using the intermittent power failures to mask her approach. The command center's entrance was now guarded by a single Dahar soldier, the others having been dispatched to investigate the disturbances. Sarah waited until the lights failed again, then moved. The guard never saw her coming. A precision strike to the throat silenced him before he could raise an alarm, and Sarah dragged his body into the shadows before slipping inside the command center. The interior was dimly lit by emergency lighting, bathing the technological array in an eerie red glow. Sarah moved quickly to the central console, recognizing the Dahar data systems from her intelligence training. She inserted a small device, another overlooked piece of equipment that had been hidden in her thermal suit, designed to copy and decrypt Dahar communications. As the device worked, Sarah scanned the displays for information about the Vzak weapon. The data scrolling across the screens confirmed her worst fears. The Dahar weren't just testing the biological agent. They were preparing for mass deployment across multiple coalition worlds. The insects were carriers for a neurotoxin specifically engineered to target human neural pathways, designed to create the appearance of natural death to avoid detection. The implications were staggering. The Dahar could potentially eliminate entire human populations without firing a single conventional weapon, leaving the infrastructure and resources intact for their takeover. Sarah's device chimed softly, indicating that it had completed its data extraction. She pocketed it and turned to leave, only to find herself face to face with General Naxira. The reptilian commander's plasma staff leveled directly at her chest. "Impossible!" Naxira hissed, vertical pupils dilating in shock. "You were terminated." Sarah managed a grim smile despite the plasma weapon pointed at her heart. "Your bugs need some work, General. They put me to sleep, but I woke up." The reptilian's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of agitation that Sarah recognized from her xenobiology training. "A miscalculation that will be corrected immediately," Naxira snarled, her finger tightening on the trigger of her weapon. Sarah dove sideways as the plasma bolt scorched the air where she had been standing. She rolled behind a console, drawing Bella's plasma rifle and returning fire in a single fluid motion. Naxira anticipated the move, her reptilian reflexes allowing her to sidestep the shot with unnerving grace. "You have courage, human," the general called out, her voice a sibilant hiss that echoed through the command center. "But you are already dead. Your body simply hasn't accepted this fact yet." Sarah didn't waste breath responding. She had spotted something critical. Naxira was wearing a specialized combat harness, its design indicating enhanced energy absorption capabilities. Standard plasma weapons would be ineffective against it. She needed a different approach. The command center's ceiling was lined with temperature regulation conduits, standard in Dahar installations, to accommodate the varying environmental needs of their multi-species forces. If she could rupture one of those conduits above Naxira's position. Sarah fired 3 rapid shots at the ceiling, each plasma bolt striking a different section of the environmental system. Superheated coolant burst from the ruptured conduits, raining down on the area below. Naxira shrieked as the caustic liquid splashed across her scales. The specialized combat harness, offering no protection against the chemical burn. Using the distraction, Sarah broke cover and charged, tackling the disoriented general and sending them both crashing into a bank of communication equipment. Naxira's superior strength allowed her to throw Sarah off almost immediately. But the human soldier had achieved her goal, separating the general from her plasma staff. Now it was hand-to-hand, human against reptilian. Naxira's claws slashed at Sarah's face, narrowly missing her eyes and leaving 3 parallel gashes across her cheek. Sarah countered with a strike to the general's throat, targeting the vulnerable breathing apparatus visible beneath the scales. The blow connected, and Naxira staggered back, momentarily unable to draw breath. Sarah pressed her advantage, delivering a series of rapid strikes to the reptilian's midsection. Where her intelligence training had taught her, the Dahar species had vulnerable nerve clusters. But Naxira was a veteran warrior. Despite her injuries, she caught Sarah's arm on the next strike, using the human's momentum to slam her against the wall with bone-jarring force. Stars exploded across Sarah's vision as her head struck the metal surface. "I will take you apart slowly," Naxira promised, her voice a ragged hiss as she recovered her breathing. "Your death will serve as data for refining the Vizak." The general reached for a secondary weapon, a curved blade that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent energy, from her belt. Sarah, dazed from the impact, could only watch as the deadly weapon arced toward her throat. At the last possible moment, Sarah's hand found the compact plasma cutter still secured at her hip. She activated it and thrust upward, the superheated industrial cutting beam catching Naxira's blade mid-swing. The 2 energy fields collided with a deafening crack, the feedback sending both combatants staggering backward. Sarah recovered first, lunging forward with the plasma cutter still active. The improvised weapon wasn't designed for combat, but its cutting beam was hot enough to slice through spacecraft hull plating, and certainly hot enough to penetrate a Dahar combat harness. Naxira realized the danger too late. She tried to dodge, but her injuries slowed her enough for Sarah to drive the plasma cutter directly into the center of the general's combat harness. The beam cut through the protective material like it was tissue paper, continuing into the reptilian flesh beneath. The general's scream was cut short as the plasma beam severed her spine, the superheated energy cauterizing the wound instantly. Naxira collapsed, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared up at the human she had dismissed as dead just hours earlier. "Impossible!" she gasped again, her voice barely audible as her systems began to shut down. Sarah stood over her fallen enemy, the plasma cutter still humming in her hand. "You should have checked more carefully," she said coldly. "Coalition soldiers don't die easily." With a final, decisive movement, Sarah drove the plasma cutter through Naxira's throat, ending the general's life and ensuring she would never again threaten coalition worlds with her biological weapons. The battle was won, but Sarah knew the war was far from over. Alarms were blaring throughout the camp now, and it would only be minutes before the remaining Dahar forces converged on the command center. She needed to complete her mission and extract before she was overwhelmed. Sarah returned to the data console, confirming that her device had successfully copied the Vizak research. But there was more. Specifications for the production facilities, deployment strategies, and most importantly, the formula for a potential antidote that Dahar scientists had developed as a precaution. This information could save countless lives. She quickly set the command center's systems to transmit a continuous distress signal on coalition frequencies, a beacon that would lead rescue forces directly to the Dahar camp. Then, using Naxira's command codes extracted from the data theft, she initiated an emergency protocol in the camp's defense systems. The effect was immediate and devastating. Defensive turrets designed to repel external threats turned inward, firing indiscriminately at heat signatures throughout the camp. Power systems overloaded, causing secondary explosions that illuminated the night sky. In the chaos, the remaining Dahar forces would be too occupied with survival to pursue a single human operative. Sarah took one last look at General Naxira's body, then retrieved the plasma staff the general had wielded. With the enhanced weapon in hand and the vital intelligence secured, she slipped out of the command center into the chaos beyond. Dawn broke over Krymar's frozen landscape, the rising sun casting long shadows across the devastated Dahar camp. What had once been a functional military installation was now a field of wreckage. Shattered structures, disabled vehicles, and the bodies of Dahar soldiers frozen in death postures across the ice. Sarah Hayes sat on a ridge overlooking the destruction, the plasma staff planted in the ground beside her like a macabre flag. The emergency beacon continued to transmit, its signal strengthening as coalition rescue forces approached. Her mission was complete, the intelligence gathered, the Dahar threat neutralized, at least temporarily. The toxin had finally worked its way out of her system, though the physical toll of the night's exertions left her exhausted beyond measure. Blood had frozen on her face where Naxira's claws had marked her, and numerous other injuries demanded medical attention. But Sarah remained alert, watchful, unwilling to lower her guard until extraction was confirmed. Her patience was rewarded when 3 coalition dropships appeared on the horizon, their engines creating rippling heat distortions in the frigid air. Sarah activated her personal beacon, confirming her identity to the approaching rescue team. The lead dropship touched down 50 meters from her position, its landing struts sinking into the permafrost. Armed coalition soldiers deployed in a defensive formation, securing the area before a medical team rushed forward to assess her condition. "Lieutenant Hayes." The squad leader approached cautiously, his weapon lowered but ready. "Major Fisher sent us. We picked up your distress signal 6 hours ago, but atmospheric interference delayed our approach." Sarah nodded, allowing the medics to help her to her feet. "The Dahar camp is secure," she reported, her voice professional despite her injuries. "I have critical intelligence regarding their biological weapons program." The officer's eyes widened as he took in the devastation below. "You did this? Alone?" "They thought they killed me," Sarah said simply. "They were wrong." As the medical team guided her toward the dropship, Sarah reached into her pocket and handed the data device to the officer. "This contains everything: the VSAC specifications, deployment plans, and the formula for a potential countermeasure. Get it to Coalition Intelligence immediately." The officer accepted the device with appropriate reverence, recognizing its importance. "Yes, Lieutenant. And what about you? Major Fisher will want a full debriefing." Sarah looked back at the destroyed Dahar camp one last time, remembering the moment she had awakened from what should have been a death sleep. "Tell him I'll report as soon as medical clears me, and tell him—" She paused, the weight of the night's events suddenly pressing down on her. "Tell him we need to prepare. This was just one Dahar operation. There will be others." Aboard the dropship, as medics treated her injuries and the pilots prepared for atmospheric exit, Sarah watched Krymar's frozen landscape recede beneath them. The Dahar had introduced a new kind of warfare with their VSAC weapon. Silent, insidious, nearly undetectable. But they had also revealed a critical weakness in their strategy: overconfidence. They had assumed their toxin was infallible, that a terminated enemy required no further verification. That mistake had cost them an entire forward base and one of their top commanders. As the dropship broke through Krymar's upper atmosphere into the star-speckled blackness of space, Sarah closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of rest. The VSAC research would now be in coalition hands, potentially saving thousands of lives. Scientists would analyze the toxin, develop countermeasures, perhaps even adapt it for medical applications, a sleeping agent that could revolutionize trauma care. From death would come life, from defeat, victory. Sarah Hayes had not died on Krymar, as the Dahar intended. Instead, she had awakened, not just from the VSAC's effects, but to a new understanding of her own capabilities and the nature of the war they were fighting. The Dahar Association would learn to fear the humans they had previously dismissed as inferior, and Sarah would ensure that the lessons of Krymar were not forgotten. The coalition dropship accelerated toward the rendezvous point with the main fleet, carrying with it a soldier who had faced death and returned, bearing intelligence that would change the course of the interstellar conflict. Behind them, Krymar continued its endless rotation, indifferent to the drama that had played out on its frozen surface, a silent witness to the resilience of a single human soldier who refused to accept defeat, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. 2 weeks later, in the secured medical wing of Coalition headquarters, Sarah Hayes stood at attention before a panel of senior officers. Her face still bore the faint scars from General Naxira's claws, but she had otherwise recovered from her ordeal on Krymar. Major Fisher, her direct commanding officer, nodded for her to be seated. Lieutenant Hayes, the intelligence you recovered has been analyzed by our scientific division. The Vizak toxin represents a significant escalation in Dahar biological warfare capabilities. Have they developed countermeasures, sir? Sarah asked, the memory of the paralysis still vivid in her mind. That's actually why we've called you here, Fisher replied, gesturing to a woman in a lab coat who sat at the far end of the table. Dr. Eliza Mendez, head of our Biological Countermeasures Division, has some information that might interest you. The scientist activated a holographic display in the center of the table, showing a molecular structure that Sarah recognized from the Dahar research data. The Vzak toxin is remarkable, Dr. Mendez explained, manipulating the hologram to highlight specific components. It doesn't actually kill its victims, at least not directly. It induces a state of extreme metabolic suppression, similar to hibernation but far more profound. Vital signs decrease to nearly undetectable levels, creating the appearance of death. Sarah leaned forward. That's consistent with my experience. But why would the Dahar design a weapon that doesn't kill? Fisher exchanged glances with Dr. Mendez before answering. We believe they intended it as a first-stage weapon. Enemies affected by Vzak would be presumed dead and left unattended, allowing Dahar forces to secure areas with minimal resistance. Then, when convenient, they could either collect the paralyzed victims for interrogation or simply dispose of them while they remained helpless. Efficient, Sarah commented grimly, and terrifying. What's remarkable, Dr. Mendez continued, is how your body responded to the toxin. Your coalition-issued immunoboosters provided some protection? Yes, but our analysis of your medical data suggests something more. Your natural metabolism processed the Vizak compound differently than our models predicted. Instead of remaining in your system for the expected 12 to 24 hours, you metabolized it in under an hour. Which means, Sarah prompted. Which means, Fisher interjected, that you're naturally resistant to the Dahar's newest weapon, and that resistance can be studied, replicated, and potentially enhanced to protect other coalition soldiers. Sarah processed this information slowly. So my blood samples are being used to develop a universal countermeasure, Dr. Mendez confirmed. Additionally, we've discovered that the Vizak compound, when modified, has remarkable medical applications. The metabolic suppression effect could revolutionize emergency trauma care, allowing critically injured patients to be stabilized until proper medical facilities can be reached. From a weapon of war to a tool for saving lives, Sarah mused. There's a certain poetry in that. Major Fisher nodded. The intelligence you gathered has provided us with more than just military advantages. It's opened new diplomatic channels as well. The Dahar Association has reached out through intermediaries, suggesting possible negotiations. Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. The Dahar want to talk? That's unprecedented. The loss of General Naxira and an entire forward base has apparently caused significant political upheaval within their hierarchy. Fisher explained. Some factions are pushing for a reassessment of their strategy against the coalition. Your actions on Krymar may have inadvertently created an opportunity for diplomatic engagement. Sarah wasn't sure how to feel about that. The memory of her fallen comrades, of the Dahar's ruthless tactics, made the idea of negotiation difficult to accept. But she was a soldier, not a politician. Her job was to follow orders and complete missions, not dictate coalition foreign policy. "What happens now, sir?" she asked finally. Fisher stood, indicating that the briefing was concluding. "Now, Lieutenant Hayes, you recover fully. Then, when you're ready, there's another mission. The intelligence you recovered included references to additional Dahar bioweapons facilities. We need to investigate them before they can develop something even more dangerous than Vizak." "I'll be ready, sir," Sarah affirmed, rising to her feet. As she left the briefing room, Sarah reflected on how a single mission, what should have been a routine reconnaissance operation, had cascaded into something that could potentially alter the course of the conflict between the coalition and the Dahar Association. From nearly dying on a frozen wasteland to providing the key to new medical technologies and possible peace negotiations. All because she had woken up when she was supposed to remain dead. Sarah touched the scars on her cheek, a permanent reminder of her confrontation with General Nexira. The Dahar had taught her something valuable on Krymar. Never assume an enemy is defeated until you've confirmed it beyond any doubt. It was a lesson she would carry with her on future missions, a lesson paid for in blood and pain, but invaluable nonetheless. Outside the headquarters complex, the sprawling metropolis of the coalition capital stretched to the horizon, its gleaming towers and bustling streets a stark contrast to Krymar's desolate landscape. Somewhere out there, beyond the protective dome of the atmosphere, the stars contained both allies and enemies, opportunities and threats. And Sarah Hayes, the soldier who had died and returned, would face them all with the same determination that had carried her through the frozen hell of Krymar. The Dahar had made a critical error in assuming her death. They would not be the last to underestimate her, or humanity, in the conflicts to come. The war continued, but with new weapons, new strategies, and perhaps, someday, new possibilities for peace. Until then, Sarah would do what she had always done: complete the mission, protect the coalition, and demonstrate why it was never wise to assume that your enemy was truly defeated until you had confirmed it with your own eyes. After all, sometimes the dead wake up, and when they do, they remember who tried to kill them.